Thank you very much for the organizers to have this presentation accepted in the slot. This is really a privilege for us to speak. We're happy to present Trinetics, and Trinetics is a company that is a merger of a number of companies that have developed the network of research data from hospitals in America and in Europe. And we are now expanding all over in Southeast Asia and also South America. So I will get right into the topic, give you a first overview of Trinetics, how it is today. And so what we do, we are completely concentrated on real world data. And we go to the different healthcare organizations that have laboratory, demographics, diagnosis, procedure, and all those clinical concepts that are captured by different hospital information systems and clinical applications. And within these hospitals, we extract and map and transform and harmonize those data into a central data model. And we do this all over the world. And so at present, we have about 170 healthcare organizations that are organized to do this. And then this network of federated appliances and servers are then presented to all those who want to study or design studies or develop protocols or install or assign sites for clinical trials. So these are the industrial sponsors, but also all academic centers and national organizations who want to start up multi-center clinical trials. We can use that. I think we believe with this system, we drop the price of initiating clinical trials by an order of magnitude, and which is, I think, the most important step in clinical trials, to start it up well at the right sites, and the sites that have at least those patients that fit the profile of your clinical trials. So how does that work in concert with all the stakeholders? So this is an industry-funded platform, which means that all those who are interested in placing multi-center clinical trials fund for a license, with a license, the access to the platform. But for the hospitals and for all those who provide the data, it is free of charge. We take up all the work, all the IT work, and all the mapping and all the extraction, transformation, and load that are necessary, because we know that IT departments in most of the hospitals in the world are overwhelmed already by the work, and definitely COVID-19 does not help their load. So we have teams that do nothing but that. The second is characteristics is that it is federated, which means the data does not leave your hospital, and only aggregates of the counts of the queries are transmitted to the Workbench for display. And it is a research platform that works in both ways. As well, the sponsors of clinical trials can use the platform, but also individuals in the hospitals that provide the data for a query can also analyze their own data, or analyze data together in agreement with collaborative networks that they do with other colleagues' hospitals. So the global network consists of sharing real-world data amongst the stakeholders. They are the data that's our job. We harmonize them because, of course, you know that the information systems in all the countries, even in different regions, and also in, of course, across the continents are very different. And we transform those data as much as we can into international standards like ICD-10, LOINC, ATC, and the like, so that queries can be launched all over the globe without having to take into account all the differences in the nationalities which they cover. And then the Workbench also allows analytical tools so that you can study your patient cohorts that you have defined within your hospital or across the different hospitals. And of course, once the server is installed, we will continue a relationship with the healthcare organizations that are member of the research networks to extend the data and to add more depth and more breadth to the data, so that the global network year by year becomes more and more mature. So from the architecture point of view, if this is the constraint of your hospital, then of course you are the guardian of the data within the healthcare organization that you lead. And these are then all the different sources of data for lab, for diagnosis, and all the lab. Then we provide you with a very performant server in which resides the data model, and in which the data model has a place for the anonymized data that we extract from the sources that you have. We transform them, and then we upload them into the database to make them accessible to a global workbench. Mind you that, of course, all the data that's not anonymized is managed by your own clinical applications, and that only de-anonymized data reside into the server that are made accessible to the outside world. Not the data themselves, only the result of queries. So whenever a query comes, it is executed within the constraints of your hospital so that we can fulfill the most stringent GDPR interpretations of compliance. So only goes out the aggregates of the counts of the queries, and these are then brought together so that they're shown to the researchers who are here logged in according to a particular protocol. So the researchers can be or industrial researchers that want to place clinical trials all over the world, or of course regional healthcare practitioners who do observational studies in the regions of within the collaborative networks, or your own researchers of your own institutions who can then query your own data according to the international harmonization that has been done within the appliance. So what does it consist of? The Workbench gives you, first of all, a query builder where you can define the inclusion and exclusion criteria that you find in the protocols or of your study. And these can then be queried across networks that can be defined according to the collaborations that you have with other organizations. And as you see here, the patient cohort has been queried, and there's about 11,000 patients that are found to fulfill the criteria of inclusion exclusion criteria. Then, of course, with these criteria, you can then analyze which criteria were the ones that are most selective to get this patient cohort, so that you can adapt the criteria to get the patient cohort to the level that you want, at the level of granularity and meaning that you intend for the clinical indication that you study. Once you have defined a number of those patient cohorts, you can then compare cohorts, you can analyze the outcomes of the cohorts. These are all statistical tools that are available to you and everybody who is on the Workbench. You can analyze the outcomes, and you can also analyze treatment pathways, which are the sequence of lines of treatment that you have been following for that particular patient cohort. So you accelerate clinical studies and collaborative research, first of all, locally, where you can study your own patient data within your own, the appliance that's run into your own healthcare organization. And you have self-service analytics for all the work that your researchers would like to do on your own data. Then with those healthcare organizations which you have a collaborative agreement with, you can define patient cohorts across all of them and do the same self-service analytics. So for example, there is a COVID-19 research network where hospitals share their patient cohorts so they can study COVID-19 across the different members of the research network. And then you can, of course, have sponsored research, the classic in clinical trials, where pharma companies or academic centers that want to organize multi-center clinical trials provide invitations for clinical trials, so that then the site can then can view if they would accept the conditions for the clinical trial and execute as quickly as possible. So you have two main reasons to join, I would say, these ecosystems, as we are now really a global player. That is, as a member, of the healthcare organizations that allow clinical trials and would like to attract more clinical trials, and also clinical trials that are particular to the latest biologicals. And then you in fact present yourself to a world of sponsors of clinical trials as a potential candidate. And this, of course, as soon as you get more and more clinical trials, you can increase the reputation of the organization. So at present, we have over 550 clinical trials that have been sponsored already through the network, which means there were more than 7,000 invitations to hospitals to participate in protocols. And of course, this is getting more and more easy, as since last year, we have more than 40 industrial partners that are customers of ours and who are integrating more and more the use of real-world data of the platform in a global scale to the central organizers within each of the companies, so that within the clinical operations, this will become a basic routine. The other way, of course, and that's I alluded up already, that you can form coalitions or collaboration networks with other hospitals close to you in your region or in the nation or across the continents, because we are present now in 29 countries, and there's data already of 450 million patients within our databases. So to be practical, how does that work? When you, as a healthcare organization, we first do a readiness check to see what are the technical possibilities that can be done. Then, if there's an intent to connect, then we start a contracting. We have a regular contract that, of course, determines the rights and the liabilities, and we have another one, the data addendum, which explains the agreement on use of patient data. And of course, our contracts at present are geared toward GDPR rules, but of course, we are happy to adapt those of the local or national level, for example, in Russia. Then we do planning for the implementation. So we discuss with your IT department in what steps we will ingest the data. We ship and have the appliance, which is a large server, installed in your premises according to the policies of security and firewalling that are local. And then we start the data integration process, in which I want to stress that the load for the local IT is kept to the minimum. As long as we know where the data is and we can have a read-only access to the data, then we know how to install most of the systems that we ever encountered in the world. Because I can assure you there's a wide variety of ways to do this. And then as soon as the load has been done, then we start the training of your people so that you can learn how to use the system. And we also provide anonymized access from anonymized healthcare organizations as a big sandbox, so you can exercise on millions of patients right away. And then, of course, we'll come into an agreement to continuously update the data quality so that your own goals and the goals of sponsors can be better met. So let me then conclude with the overall at a glance view, where you see that there's about 26,000 studies that have been analyzed already on the system, and 7,000 invitations have been done to healthcare organizations to participate in clinical trials, where we have 170 already connected all over the world, and there's about 100 that are in process of being connected now, over so many patients in so many countries and with so many potential sponsors. So I think we have a good platform to foster the clinical research at, I would say, digital speed, And I think we have two examples already. Of course, COVID for us was um, a very good way to show how digital data can accelerate research, because in COVID, we know that it's not a sponsor that selects the sites, but it was the virus that selected sites. And so we could follow COVID from North Korea, where we have already a network of hospitals, all the way to Italy, to Spain, and then to other countries, and now, of course, to America, for example. So in all those COVID patients were then harmonized at the best of our abilities within the platform, so that patient cohorts can be defined across continents and comparisons can be made. Of course, as you know, with GDPR, the only queries that can be done on the system are those that support clinical research, and not any commercial or marketing exercises that anybody would like to do from the hospital out, or even from the industrial sponsors out. This is a major requirement for us, because this alleviates the explicit patient consent that we need to do just to query for patient screening, because of course, as you know, patient consent is necessary for the clinical trial itself, and there we do not change anything from what is a current practice. And I thank you for your attention and the opportunity to talk to you. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Dear Luc, thank you so much for this important presentation. It was very interesting information presented. Within this conference, there will be a similar presentation from Russian colleagues who are doing more or less similar things, and they will give an example with COVID-19. So please listen to this presentation. Maybe you could cooperate with our Russian colleagues after they present their material.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we have no sound. Interpreters have no sound. Okay, the sound is back. We know where we can find data like from electronic medical record, from medical systems that Russian hospitals have. We also have a serious technical problems and issues related to safety and so on and so forth. But the most difficult thing, as I see it, and it's reflected in our book, is the data analysis. Well, RWE, real world evidence. Well, how can we interpret RWE data? Of course, there might be some conflicts with the traditional schemes related to evidence-based medicine, and so on and so forth. The next presenter is Professor. Oh, you have a question? Yes, 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 please. You may ask the question in Russian. Dear Luke, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. I'd like to ask you one question. What about some studies which are not part of the typical clinical practice, like genetic trials, genetic studies? You mentioned them in your presentation. When we analyze such trials, such studies, and maybe these will be additional studies, well, we must inform the consent from patients included in the study. Is it correct? And the second question is, should we inform the patient about the result of the genetic studies? And also, how long will you be keeping those genetic samples when the study is over? Thank you.
Yes, this is a very interesting topic. It needs a very lengthy answer, but let's reduce my answer today into something that's very pragmatic, and because we are interested in things that we can use today, and if the legal questions are not resolved, then we don't handle that. So the genetics that we include now are those that can be standardized in line code, which means that they are in fact snippets, or they are biomarkers that are restrained. So of course they are quite specific to different clinical indications, but the full genomics are we're handling them, but we're not allowing them on the platform yet for query, just to make sure that whenever it is being done, that we would be covered by all the ethical and also legal implications. So at present, the reason why we don't push as much as we would like and as the sponsors of clinical trials would like is that the standardization of the genomics is not widespread over all the hospitals that are already in the network. So we can only work with very selected hospitals, and we're preparing this with them. But to let it be accessible to queries globally, we only restrict it to those that are linkable. And then it looks like it is just a laboratory results. So you don't have the patient-specific sequences that could identify patients. So we have also an organization that checks on us for anything that we do that could be an opening to patient re-identification from the de-anonymized data that we have. So we are on constant audit, and even if we add new codes, for example, in SNOMED CT or others, these have to be approved by that external body that checks if there would not be an opportunity then to de-identify data without knowing which patient this data was from. So whenever there is a danger of that, this is kept out of our system. So definitely genomics is of course doubly checked, but you have the general genomics that are used for just sequences and as biomarkers, for example, in cancers. And these seem to be quite all right after the analysis. So I think it's very promising, but we need to thread very carefully.
Colleagues, we have one more question. Evgeny, you would like to ask a question? Yes. Thank you very much, Luke, for your presentation. My question is a technical one. In your presentation, you showed that you collect the depersonalized data and you optimize this data. And this is important in terms of compliance. This is important in legal terms. This is important for those who order the collection of such data, right? At the same time, you showed 450 million patients. And I have a question in this connection. How do you avoid duplication when you analyze all the data from 450 million patients? That's the number of cases, or is it the number of unique patients? If these are unique patients, well, how do you avoid a situation when two different healthcare facilities analyze the data from the same patient? How do you avoid duplication? Thank you so much.
This is a mighty interesting question. Thank you. Well, when we say 450 million, this is unique identification within the jurisdiction of the healthcare organization that are members of the network. So sometimes in one city we have 2 or 3 hospitals that are member. So we cannot ascertain on the outset that these are not duplicates of patients in the database. Now, there are some countries, like for example, Denmark, where each patient has been identified individually and where all the information systems use the same identification. So there, the job is easy. It's much harder, for example, in America, where this is not done and where even you don't even have a national patient number to access. And there, a number of companies do then what we call the tokenization, which is the record linkage that they try to find between the different sources of data that are combined. So again, this is also needs to be legally threaded very carefully, but we solve quite a number of problems with that. As you know, real-world data is always very imperfect data, but since we show the advantage to the sponsors of studies that's so high, they accept, I would say, the big gaps and the big holes that we have, or from a technical point of view, or from a legal point of view. So whatever is possible within the, I would say, the legal framework of the particular region, we have software solutions that can all do record linkage based on demographics, or do the linking directly on for example, a national number. But all these, as you already identified, the technical solution is difficult, but still very easy compared to the regulatory requirements around that. But we do that whenever it's possible.